In a previous video, when we talked about the pyramids and the American young Earth creationist dating of the global flood, questions about Egyptian chronology and how we know that Egyptian chronology is reliable kept coming up. We have already discussed the topic of synchronisms, but today we are going to talk about the major sources we have for the reign lengths of the kings of Egypt on this episode of Ancient Egypt and the Bible. When we talk about the reign lengths of the kings of Egypt, there are a variety of sources that are used to determine the chronology of Egypt. So what we are going to do in this video is discuss the major chronicles and king lists that are available to make a reconstruction of the chronology of Egypt. Now, one of the things we have to note here before getting into the major sources is that these aren't the only sources. In fact, they're not even, in many respects, the most important sources. These sources provide a general framework for reconstructing a chronology. However, we also have thousands of other minor sources. Things such as papyri, tens of thousands of papyruses that have dates on them. We have votive stelae that also have dates. We have tomb biographies. We have all these different pieces of data that go into the construction of chronologies. So what we are going to do here is just discuss the major chronicles and king lists that are used to frame a chronology. But these are by no means the only sources that are available to Egyptologists. Okay, so let's discuss the first one, which is Manetho. Everyone knows about Manetho without exactly understanding what Manetho is. Manetho was a Greek-Egyptian priest who lived in Alexandria. He wrote a king list of Egyptian kings as a means to give street cred to the reign of Ptolemy II. He wrote primarily in Greek for his Greek-speaking audience. However, he was also literate in all forms of Egyptian. Now, Manetho was the guy who invented the 30 dynasty numbering system that we use today. He wrote each dynasty in sequential order without considering co-regencies and parallel dynasties. However, most of the co-regencies and parallel dynasties have been accounted for today. Unfortunately, no original copies of Manetho have survived. The 7 texts we have of Manetho were selections of his works that were preserved by other Jewish and Christian authors. Manetho is the only Egyptian king list that has been known since antiquity because it was preserved by Josephus and several of the church fathers. As such, it was used by Scaliger and Ussher in their chronologies. Recently, Manetho has been used in some of the date of the Exodus debates. Some of the texts we have of Manetho appear to mention the Exodus. For example, Titus Kennedy continues to state that Manetho said that Amenhotep II was the pharaoh of the Exodus. Similarly, Jabari Ozaze stated recently that Manetho claimed that Ahmose I was the pharaoh of the Exodus. So what's going on here? Of the 7 texts that have survived from Manetho, only 4 mention the Israelite Exodus, and each source mentions a different pharaoh as the Exodus pharaoh. Josephus' copy says that the Exodus pharaoh was Amenhotep II. Eusebius' copy says that the Exodus pharaoh was Akhenaten. Africanus' copy says that the Exodus pharaoh was Ahmose I. And Theophilus' copy says the Exodus pharaoh was Tutmosis IV. 4 recensions, 4 different Exodus pharaohs. So what does this tell us about Manetho? Well, First thing is that the four sources are not copying from each other, but do seem to stem from a Greek original. The other thing is that if we do the text critical work, we discover that none of the pharaohs for the Exodus that are mentioned are original to Manetho. And this makes sense. Manetho worked for the Ptolemies, propping up Ptolemaic rule. He had no interest in the Israelites or their exodus. We can even extend this principle to the anti-Semitism said to be recorded in Manetho. For example, the lepers of Egyptian origin and the descendants of the Hyksos as common forefathers of the Jews. Historically, anti-Semitism is not attested before the Maccabeans. Therefore, these references to the Jews should be dated to 1st century AD copies of Manetho instead of being ascribed to Manetho in the 3rd century BC. Overall, it is important to note that the various copyists have tried to make Manetho fit with biblical chronology. And because of this, even with the best textual criticism, Manetho remains an imperfect source. Now, the next important source we're going to talk about here is the Palermo Stone. This is the Royal Annals of Memphis, better known as the Palermo Stone. The Palermo Stone is a list of years from the early dynastic period and Old Kingdom. The kings mentioned on the stone are from the 1st to 5th dynasties, although the reigns from dynasties 1 to 3 are the only ones that are complete. Unlike other king lists, this one is broken down according to years and the most important events of those years. This list records reign lengths down to the month sometimes, cattle counts, religious festivals, and other cultural information. And the Palermo Stone remains one of the most important sources of early dynastic Egypt, especially for the 3rd dynasty. Next, the Turin Canon. Another important source for Egyptian chronology is the Turin King List, also known as the Turin Canon. It is the only true king list preserved from ancient Egypt before the Ptolemaic period. This source was written in Egyptian and contains both the names of the kings and how long they reigned. The Turin Canon begins with the gods and demigods, the Necheru, then progresses to the spirit kings, the Aku, and then the historical and human kings, the Remechu. Of the historical kings, the Turin Canon covers dynasties 1 to 16, and the Turin Canon breaks it down according to dynasties, in a way that is similar to Manetho, but not quite the same. The Turin Canon treats dynasties 1 to 5, 7 to 8, and 9 to 10, each grouping as single dynasties. Generally speaking, the reign lengths and kings mentioned in the Turin Canon are remarkably similar to what is found in Manetho. Next, the Abydos King List. The Abydos King List is a list of kings found on the temple of Seti I at Abydos. This list has no reign lengths, but it is a sequential list of king names that are clearly inscribed into the temple walls. This list is a political document that was used to support Seti I as pharaoh by connecting his reign to the kings of the past with whom he was not blood related. The first intermediate period, the second intermediate period, and the Amarna kings from Akhenaten to Ai are excluded from this list. Because again, this is a political list. It is a political list used to tie the reign and to support the reign of Seti I in accordance with the great kings of the past. Dishonorable kings need not apply. And then finally, we have the Saqqara Tablet. The Saqqara Tablet is a king list that was found in the tomb of Joroi, who was a chief lector priest and overseer of works for the royal monuments of Ramses II. The tablet originally mentioned 58 kings, of which 47 survive. The list is similar to the Abydos king list, but is slightly different. The text starts with Anebjeb and Ka'ah of Dynasty 1 and ends with Ramses II. This list includes Sobek Neferu, the last king, female king, of Dynasty 12, which had been excluded from the Abydos king list. This list also reverses the order of 11th and 12th dynasty kings. So, conclusion. Now, these lists are the starting point for developing an Egyptian chronology. The reign lengths of these lists generally agree with each other with some important exceptions. However, our use of these king lists is not the final step in developing Egyptian chronology, but only the beginning. For the next step, we have to verify that each reign length is accurate. And we can do that by comparing the reign lengths from the lists to private stele, tomb biographies, papyri, wine dockets and labels, commemorative scarabs, and other dated documents. In general, what we find is that the dates on the king lists are pretty accurate. But where we have found differences and inaccuracies, most of these have now been resolved through a careful reconstruction from sources outside of the lists, which, thankfully, there is much additional data that is available to us today. So, anyway, we hope you enjoyed this video and you learned something. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.